Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I want to thank you for joining me here on Now TV. I'm just thrilled absolutely to death that the viewership of my videos of Now TV that are being viewed and placed on YouTube as well. It's obvious that the viewership is growing. Look, I'd love to say that every one of my videos is going viral. Obviously, that's not true. But I will say this. My subscription number is going up. The viewership is going up. For that, I am extremely, extremely thankful. And by the way, I want to thank some of you who have ordered my brand new book, just introduced last month in May. It is entitled Circumcision and the New Creation ? And I want to share with you just a little bit from the back cover. On the back cover, it says, I say, why do we need a book on physical circumcision in this modern time? When I very first began writing this book and sharing my thoughts, concepts with some different people, I had different people say, circumcision is kind of an outdated subject, isn't it? Why would you spend so much time researching and writing on circumcision? Well, the point of fact is, and all scholars recognize this, in the New Testament, circumcision is a humongous issue. In Pauline literature especially, 1 Corinthians 7, Galatians, the whole book, really, Ephesians. I mean, on and on we go with Paul dealing with those, the Judaizers, who were saying that Gentile Christians had to be circumcised and keep the law of Moses to be saved. Well, listen, let me tell you something. In our modern day, there is a relatively new group, well, you could claim that it goes back in history to a certain extent, of people who claim that we must continue to keep the law of Moses. They're called the Torah observant movement. I had a formal public debate with a representative from that movement some years ago. And I asked him, do you believe that physical circumcision is binding on Christians today? And his answer to that was yes. And yet he had no answer whatsoever for the book of Galatians, where Paul said, concerning those who are binding circumcision on Christians, on Gentile Christians, Paul said, those of you who seek to be justified by the law, you are fallen from grace. And this I say, that if any man is circumcised, in other words, to keep the law, to be Torah observant, Christ shall profit you nothing. He literally had no answer for that. Well, on the back of my book, after posing the question, why do we need a book on physical circumcision in our modern time, I asked the following. What relevance does this, quote, arcane, unquote, subject have for Christians today? So let me respectfully suggest that the study of circumcision is important to a proper understanding of, number one, God's grace, salvation by faith, biblical eschatology, the modern validity of the law of Moses, the nature of the new covenant, and the true nature of the new creation. So let me ask you, are those important issues? And of course, you know they are. And so that's why this book is so important. And let me tell you something. There's not another book like this out there anywhere. Now, it's available on Amazon. It is available in Kindle form on Amazon. It is also available on my websites, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com. And if you'll go to my website, if you order the book, now I can't do this if you order off of Amazon, okay? But if you go to my website and you order the book and you send me a note when you order the book and say, hey, Don, I saw your offer on Now TV. I will refund your shipping. Now, I cannot ship books. This is U.S. orders only, all right? I cannot ship books out of the U.S. at the U.S. postal rates. If you want a copy of the book, perhaps in PDF form, in electronic form, then contact me, and I'll be glad to try to help you out. But for U.S. orders only, if you see this offer on Now TV, send me a note that says you saw the offer on Now TV, and I'll refund your shipping. I think you will find this book to be absolutely eye-opening. Now, got to hurry because I want to get absolutely directly into Revelation chapter 11. We've been dealing with this passage for a good little bit. But listen to me. As I mentioned, our viewership here on Now TV has been growing. However, we are being given the opportunity to expand the potential audience of our program by 3 times. We are being given the opportunity, naturally at extra cost, to expand the potential viewership of this program to over 300 million homes. Do you catch the power of that? Now, I'll be very blunt, be very honest. I don't have the funds to do that. But if you like this program, if you would be willing to help support this program, to expand our outreach to a potential audience of 300 million homes, then please go to my website, DonKPreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, and send me an email and say, listen, Don, love what you're doing. I want to see your audience expand to over 300 million homes. How can I help? And I'll love to correspond with you about it. I mean, listen, folks, this is absolutely incredible. It is unprecedented. Help us expand the outreach of God's truth to over 300 million homes. Will you do that? Will you help us out? Okay. I've been sharing with you, and of course we are continuing our examination of what? The challenge of Christ. Just this morning on Facebook, I had a guy just outright attack me. And he said, Jesus never predicted that he was coming back in the first century. Well, I quoted a couple of verses. I gave the scriptural references. I even quoted Jesus' own words, Matthew 16, 27 and 28. The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Now look, folks, I'm sorry, we don't have any 2,000-year-old people running around. So that means that Jesus either came with his angels and judgment in the lifetime of that first century audience, or Jesus lied or he failed. Which is it? Will you accept the challenge of Christ? I have spent a good deal of time sharing with you both the Old Testament testimony in regard to the nature of the coming of the Lord, that it was never intended to be understood as a literal, visible, bodily coming of Jesus, but that it was to be understood of God's intervention into history to use one nation to judge another nation. We've been focused on Revelation chapter 11, for about the last 3, perhaps 4 weeks. And as I promised you last week, I want to delve directly into Revelation chapter 11. Now, let's refresh our memory. We have 2 witnesses. They are miraculously endowed with the power to call down rain or to call down fire from heaven. These have the miraculous power of the Holy Spirit. Their message is the message of Revelation 14, 6-8. Babylon is fallen, that great city, for the hour of her judgment has come. So the message of the 2 witnesses is the message of the impending fall of Babylon. Babylon is the city, quote, where the Lord was crucified. I think you have no problem whatsoever knowing where the Lord was crucified. It was not in Rome. It wasn't in the Roman Catholic Church. It wasn't in America. It was in Jerusalem, at Jerusalem. Okay. The witnesses are slain, but they are resurrected. Their cause is vindicated. Notice now, verse 14, Revelation chapter 11. The second woe is past. Behold, the third woe is coming quickly. Now, look, folks, when we try to extrapolate the fulfillment of Revelation chapter 11, 2,000 years beyond the time of John, we are violating the text. I mean, after all, we have the depiction of the judgment of Jerusalem in Revelation chapter 11, verses 11 and following. Following hard on that, following shortly, quickly, soon upon that, there is no temporal gap. There is no gap of 2,000 years. Following hard on that. And listen, the language here, that third woe is coming quickly. And we know that these, and look, Greek scholars comment on this in commentary after commentary after commentary. We go back to Revelation chapter 8. At the sounding of the trumpets, we find that the next series was about to be blown. The series of trumpets was about to blow. Well, what happens at the sounding of the last trumpet? Oh, it's the resurrection. And you know, just the other day I was conversing with someone on Facebook again, and they were a futurist. They were an amillennialist. And they said to me, the coming of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection are literal physical events. So I asked them, okay, so the coming of the Lord, the judgment, and the resurrection are literal physical events. I said, so let me ask you, is the coming on the cloud literal? Yes. Is the shout of the angel literal and audible? Yes. Is the sounding of the trumpet literal, audible? Yes. And I said, well, okay. Now you have to understand something, that a great deal of amillennialists are also historicists. They believe that a great deal of Revelation has been fulfilled down through the course of history in the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD. Well, guess what? That literally demands that since the sounding of the trumpets was literal, according to this individual, and the trumpets heralded the fall of Rome, that must mean that at the fall of Rome, the world must have heard the sounding of the trumpet. Wow. I don't remember anyone ever arguing that before. I'm almost afraid to mention that, because surely as I do, someone's going to go back into history books and say, well, somebody thought they heard the sound of a trumpet. Do you see the problem here, folks? The sound of the trumpet is no more literal than the shout, than the cloud, and vice versa. These are images. We have to understand that the very image of Christ riding on the cloud is taken from Daniel chapter 7. It is based upon Psalms 104. It is based upon other Old Testament prophecies that speak of Christ, that God is the God who rides on clouds. And the imagery of riding on the clouds is the imagery of divinity. It is the imagery of judgment. It is the imagery of Christ as Messiah. These are not literal, physical, or, may I use the term again, visible events. The language conveys ideas, conveys mental images, not literal, physical realities. Now, the point here is that you have the sounding of the trumpet, and we are told in Revelation chapter 10 that at the sounding of the trumpet, the sounding of the seventh trumpet. Now, here's what you've got to catch, okay? I know that my dispensational friends disagree with this. That's fine, but their objection has no merit. And I may or may not discuss that. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul says, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep. But at the last trumpet, those who are asleep in Christ shall rise. The last trumpet. Well, in Revelation 8 through 11, how many trumpets do we have? 7. And at the sounding of the seventh trumpet, according to Revelation chapter 10, 6 and 7, the mystery of God foretold by the prophets would be fulfilled. In other words, everything that the Old Covenant prophets foretold would be fulfilled at the sounding of the seventh trumpet. Now, let's be reminded here of something that's absolutely critical. You know, I'll in just a short time, in my weekly YouTube videos, I will be reviewing this book, Thinking About AD 70, by a gentleman by the name of Kyle Pope. He's a Church of Christ minister. And that review and response and refutation of his book will include the following point. The book of Revelation tells us that at the sounding of the seventh trumpet, the mystery of God is foretold by the prophets. Well, who are those prophets? Well, the prophets that the book of Revelation cites, quotes, and alludes to over 440 times are the Old Testament prophets. Do you catch the power of that? But here's the deal. Mr. Pope, in his book, says that God was through with Old Covenant Israel at the cross. He says the law of Moses and all things foretold therein, the gathering, the time of salvation, were all foretold and fulfilled, foretold in the Old Testament to be sure, but fulfilled at the cross. That's supposedly when the gathering took place. Well, I didn't realize the cross was the time of the gathering. Did you? It's almost a new argument, but I'll guarantee it's not a good one. So I want you to be looking for and, watching for my response to this. Now, again, here's the point. Revelation chapter 10, the sounding of the seventh trumpet would be when all of the Old Covenant prophets would be fulfilled. The Old Testament prophets foretold the judgment, the coming of the Lord, the resurrection, the arrival of the kingdom. Therefore, at the sounding of the seventh trumpet, which would occur when? Immediately at the fall of Babylon, the city where the Lord was crucified. Revelation chapter 11, verse 14. 2 woes are past, the third is coming quickly. Now look, folks, I'm sorry. We can't twist, we cannot distort, we cannot destroy the language of imminence that is found here and say, well, I know that it says the third woe is coming quickly, but really all that means is when it finally gets around to coming, it will come rapidly. Not soon, not shortly, just simply rapidly when it finally takes place. No, I'm sorry, that won't work. John was told these things, everything in the book, we have what is known as an inclusio in the book of Revelation. Revelation 1, 1-3. These things must shortly take place. And from the Greek term entokai, and entokai never, ever, ever, listen to me very carefully, entokai never, ever, ever refers to the rapidity of action as opposed to the imminence of action. Now, rapidity of action may very well be included, but imminence is never excluded. Never. The term is only used 7 or 8 times in the New Testament. So here at the very beginning of the book, we have the promise. These things must shortly come to pass. Then, Revelation chapter 22, 10-12, behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me. Verse 12, these things must shortly, entokai, come to pass. So, now what that means is, and again, it's an inclusio. At the very beginning of the book, at the very ending of the book, the same identical term is used. And in the literature of the day, when you have that kind of bookend brackets, that means that every single thing between those two bookends was to come soon, shortly, quickly. It was at hand. And like I said, that's incredibly important. So when men such as Mr. Pope tell us, follow me here, God was through with Israel at the cross. God nailed the old covenant to the cross. And in his book, he even says, if a covenant or a law has been abrogated, set aside, or annulled, none of its promises are applicable. Well, okay, John cites, alludes to, quotes from the Old Testament prophecies of the last days, and says these things must shortly come to pass. He doesn't say, now remember folks, the law of Moses was nailed to the cross. The Old Testament prophets were all fulfilled by the cross. No, it doesn't say that. These things must shortly come to pass. Do you catch the power of that? So, what was about to shortly come to pass? Well, Revelation chapter 11, verse 15. Then the seventh angel sounded, okay? What was supposed to happen under the sounding of the seventh trumpet? The mystery of God, foretold by the prophets, would be fulfilled. Now, the Greek word that is used for fulfilled means brought to pass, to come to pass. It means that when the seventh angel would sound the seventh trumpet, then and only then would the things that were found under the seventh trumpet come to a reality. Doesn't mean they may not have been initiated prior to that. I'm not suggesting that, because after all, the kingdom of the Lord was initiated even during his ministry. So I'm not denying that. But what it means without any doubt whatsoever is that this is the consummative arrival. This is the full bloom of that kingdom. So we recognize the already but the not yet. But we also recognize that in the sounding of the seventh trumpet, all prophecy, listen to me, all prophecy would be fulfilled. Now, very, very quickly, I want you to catch the power of what I'm about to say. Remember in Revelation chapter 11, verse 11 and 13, we have the destruction and the judgment of the city, quote, where the Lord was crucified. Remember that? And following it immediately is the day of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection, the judgment and the rewarding of the prophets. Watch. In Luke 21, verse 21 to 24, which virtually everyone, even the dispensationalists, admit, refers to the events of AD 70. Jesus said, these be the days. What days? The events surrounding and consummating in the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. These be the days of vengeance in which, pay careful attention, catch the power of this, in which all things that are written must be fulfilled. Fulfilled, genitai. Brought to reality. Just like right here in Revelation, the mystery of God would be brought to reality at the sounding of the seventh trumpet. I want to tell you what, folks, this is some of the most incredible unity, some of the most marvelous, beautiful harmony and unity in the Scriptures that could possibly be found. And yet, listen, I was raised believing that the book of Revelation had nothing whatsoever to do with the fall of Jerusalem and the judgment of Babylon, i.e., the city where the Lord was crucified. I had no concept, no clue whatsoever. Very quick anecdote. When I was a young man, about 11, 12 years old, I attended a, quote, gospel meeting in Greenland, Arkansas. A minister by the name of F.I. Stanley, who was very prominent in the churches of Christ at the time. It was a 2-week-long meeting. Can you imagine that now? The very first week was just simply the proclamation of the gospel. He was a powerful speaker. The second week was a study of the book of Revelation. I was seated as an 11, 12-year-old kid on the very front row. I was absolutely awestruck. I was a sponge. And he had his great big sheet charts up there. An artist had done them for him. And on those sheet charts, he set forth his belief that Babylon of Revelation, that the beast was the Roman Catholic Pope, that Babylon was the Roman Catholic Church, and that the book of Revelation was about the destruction of Rome in 476 AD. Look, I got to tell you, I believed every word of it until I changed my own mind through my own independent study, and Mr. Stanley also changed his mind and became a full preterist. We're going to develop this next week, folks. You do not want to miss it. I'll see you then.